watching continuing coverage of the Robert Mueller testimony in front of the House Judiciary Committee, where he is answering questions until about 11:30 Eastern Time this morning, or he's listening to lawmakers make statements until about 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time this morning. We want to bring on our panel to get some quick reaction while they take a break there in Washington. Joining us now, Dr. Rebecca Grant, who is a national security analyst and president of IRIS Independent Research. Also, Max Burns, a Democratic strategist and senior contributor, Millennial Politics. We have Sery Kim, Republican strategist and former senior Trump administration official, and Vinoo, criminal defense attorney, also with us this morning. Thank you all for being here. And if I could, I want to start actually with Sery, because Sery, you are the only one who actually brought a copy of the Mueller report with you. You have clearly read it thoroughly. I want you to hold it up for the camera, if you don't mind, real quick, with all of your notations that you have, all those Post-it notes.
Yes.
Quick reaction to what we've seen so far.
Well, I think it's an extraordinary hearing for one simple reason. Chairman Jerry Nadler of the House Judiciary Committee either didn't read the report or he doesn't understand the law. Because the report is very clear. In Volume 2, where we discuss obstruction of justice, Special Counsel Mueller said that the president was analyzed under 3 criteria: an obstructive act, a nexus to a legal proceeding, and criminal intent. And Special Counsel Mueller repeatedly said, and I quote from page 7, because that is the exact page that Jerry Nadler used. He says, the evidence we obtained did not establish that the president was involved in an underlying crime related to Russian election interference.
Hold it right there. Dr. Grant, if you don't mind. It's clear that Robert Mueller is not going to deviate from his report, and he made that clear before he testified and his opening statement. So are we learning anything new? Are the Democrats getting anything that they can perhaps potentially use later in an ongoing investigation?
Well, I think Rep. Jim Jordan just ripped some of the counterintelligence lid off this investigation, so we are seeing a few snippets here. I thought the question that came up from Sensenbrenner about did this rise to an impeachable offense was really key, and he got Mueller to say that really it hadn't done that. Mueller was weak there, but he didn't come in and say, yes, it did, as with Ken Starr. Mueller put the question I'd really like to hear answered. He said, I want to make sure the American people had confidence in that election outcome. Please, someone get that question back and let's get Mueller to answer. Mueller, is there confidence in that election outcome?
Max, you're a Democratic strategist. Yep. This is a Democratic-controlled committee. They are clearly not happy with the findings of the report. They're digging for more. How are they doing?
I think what you see here is a big difference between people asking sort of fact-based questions and people who are auditioning to please the president. We had Louis Gohmert, we had Jim Jordan shouting till they were red in the face and repeating questions that they knew the special counsel couldn't answer. It's performative. With the Democrats we've had within the first 10 minutes, Robert Mueller again say he did not exonerate the president on obstruction of justice, and that had he been able to continue investigating it, there potentially would have been evidence of that.
Well, Vinoo, I want you to weigh in on this as an attorney, a criminal defense attorney. After nearly 3 years of investigation, certainly almost 2 years for the Robert Mueller investigation, they didn't find any criminal liability or any wrongdoing that they could prove on behalf of the president. So, your take on that?
Well, actually, that's not accurate. What they didn't find was that there was they couldn't prove a conspiracy between members of the Trump campaign and the Russian government. What they did find, and they did lay out, was 10 acts of obstruction that would have been prosecuted had he not been a sitting president. I think people have to understand.
Hang on one second. They did not establish that the Trump campaign conspired with Russians.
That's correct.
That is a finding of the report.
That's correct. That's volume 1. But on volume 2,
they did not find enough evidence of criminal conspiracy. They did not
regarding Russian interference or a conspiracy with the Russian campaign. But what it did is, remember, there's 2 parts. Obviously, we all know this. The second part relating to the obstruction by President Trump. And they let out 10 acts of obstruction. And in this case, they've laid it out. It's up to Congress to do what it's supposed to do. Whether he uses the term impeachable offense or not, he's laid out a blueprint for Congress. Now, watching him today, you got to understand the kind of person Mueller is. he is a lifelong DOJ person. He's not going to go back and forth and get into arguments when people are yelling at him. He's just sitting there.
Sarah, you're shaking your head. Why?
That is a totally inaccurate characterization of Volume 2, which I have read 19 times.
I've also read it. It is not inaccurate.
Those 10 alleged acts of obstruction, specifically as it relates to Don McGahn, the evidence that Robert Mueller presents is that Don McGahn said that he leaked to the New York Times that the president said that he should, quote-unquote, fire Mueller. There is no additional evidence, and Robert Mueller specifically says in that exact same analysis where there was obstruction of justice that the president told the truth when he said he did not instruct McGahn. So it's very clear that the Democratic Party has created a narrative that is not based upon reading the full text and understanding the full text of both volumes. It is in the report.
The text is actually very clear of the acts laid out by the president. I mean, telling Sessions to unrecuse himself, firing Comey. These are pretty brazen, bold acts.
Well,
and you know, when you look at this, it's up to Congress. This is all of this is a show. This is political, right? I'm a legal commentator. I'm a former prosecutor. I'm telling you, there's evidence. It's a question of what the Democrats want to do with it. They have the majority. They can begin impeachment hearings, but they're sitting back if they want to score points.
If there were enough evidence to indict the president or to say that he could be indicted if he weren't president, I think Mueller made it clear, Dr. Grant, that he would have done that. Or am I wrong on that point?
You're right. Mueller made it 100% clear. Can you really look at Mueller, this tremendous American, and say that if he thought it was best for America to indict the president, that he would not already have done so? It's clear from reading the Mueller report that no prosecutor wants to take forward the evidence that they turned up. It was way too squishy. Was the president upset? You bet he was. Did he rant and rave? Clearly he did. Did this rise to real obstruction? No way.
You guys are not listening to his actual words. He could not indict the president. He can't even charge him because because he can't say that he's guilty because that wouldn't be fair because he wouldn't have a criminal trial to clear his name. So
I don't even hear Mueller giving the body language of guilty.
All right, but in his own report, Mueller found that the Trump campaign did not collude or conspire with Russia. That's what the report.
Volume 1.
Volume 2 didn't have a conclusion, and we heard one of the lawmakers rip into that. Like, that's not his job to come up with no conclusion. You come up with a conclusion. He's the special counsel. He's got a special investigation, and he went on for 2 years. If he had a conclusion, we probably would have reached
the conclusion. He laid it out. He laid it out, and he laid it out for Congress. It's up to Congress. Let the Democrats control the House of. They control the House. They can do what they want. They have enough. Whether they want to do it, that's a political question.
Let's give Max a little more time. Robert Mueller is a veteran of Capitol Hill. He's an attorney. He's very familiar with these kinds of hearings. He's been in plenty of them. He knows how to handle it. He was a reluctant witness. He didn't want to come here and do this. In fact, he had to be subpoenaed to testify before these two House committees. Why was he so reluctant to testify, and why did he seek out his camp, according to the AG, sought out that letter, making sure that he didn't deviate from the report?
I think you see the difference in that Robert Mueller takes his job as special prosecutor very seriously. He didn't want to come out and potentially misspeak or miscontextualize the information that he published. We've seen him repeatedly referring back to his notes. It's made for a little bit of a slow hearing, but at least it's factually accurate. And to the point on obstruction, the president cannot legally be charged. Robert Mueller made that very clear.
Okay,
on page 157.
He could have come up with a conclusion.
No, he's legally barred from making the conclusion.
I'm not
It says that on page 157.
Sarah's an attorney. I'm not an attorney.
Well, I think whether you're an attorney or not attorney, you read the report. You understand what Robert Mueller is saying both in written text as well as verbally. And it's very clear that he chose to not make a prosecutorial decision. That was his opinion. It was not a requirement by the OLC
or
DOJ guidelines. Dr. Jerry Nadler has just re-entered the hearing room, chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. He's in discussion still. So, are you surprised, Sery, at the way that Mueller has handled these questions? He doesn't seem all that familiar with the material.
I'm terribly shocked. As you noted, as everybody has noted, this man was director of FBI. He graduated from prestigious law school. He fought in Vietnam. He was head of FBI the week before 9/11. So every time Congress had a hearing about the lack of follow-through on evidence, Mueller testified. He was the head of the FBI when we decided the Patriot Act was illegal. And yet look at his body language. He is so uncomfortable. He does not want to be there. And I think if I was Mueller, I would be super frustrated.
We're going to leave it there and go back to the hearing. Watching continuing coverage of the House Judiciary and Intelligence Committee hearings where former Special Counsel Robert Mueller was grilled about his investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election. Democratic-led House Judiciary Committee now over after each lawmaker was given 5 minutes to question Robert Mueller, with Republicans and Democrats taking turns, a format that will be followed in the next hearing with the Intelligence Committee expected to begin in roughly 30 minutes. Before we get to our panel, let's bring in Mike Emanuel, who is live on Capitol Hill. Mike, it's hard not to miss that there weren't a whole lot of questions being asked, but a whole lot of statements being made. And I'm wondering, since some people waited apparently all night for a seat in that room, whether they got what they were waiting for, and whether you saw any surprises today.
Well, Rick, good afternoon. Yeah, welcome to Congressional Speechifying. You've got a high-profile hearing with lots of eyeballs watching the TV set, and so you had a variety of lawmakers making speeches based on their political perspective. Some Democrats saying, aha, this is the reason to go forward with impeachment proceedings. Some Republicans saying the president lashed out because he was not treated fairly. Right off the bat, you had the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Gerald Nadler, a Democrat from New York, asking the special counsel about statements President Trump made since the conclusion of this probe.
The president has repeatedly claimed that your report found there was no obstruction and that it completely and totally exonerated him. But that is not what your report said, is it?
Correct. It is not what the report said.
So the report did not conclude that he did not commit obstruction of justice. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And what about total exoneration? Did you actually totally exonerate the president?
No.
Some Democrats are clearly hoping this will generate energy and momentum moving toward impeachment proceedings against President Trump. A key Republican, John Ratcliffe of Texas, used his time to go after Mueller, suggesting the president had been treated unfairly.
Can you give me an example other than Donald Trump where the Justice Department determined that an investigated person was not exonerated because their innocence was not conclusively determined?
I cannot, but this is unique.
Okay, well, you can't. Time is short. I've got 5 minutes. Let's just leave it at you can't find it because I'll tell you why. It doesn't exist. It was not the special counsel's job to conclusively determine Donald Trump's innocence or to exonerate him because the bedrock principle of our justice system is a presumption of innocence.
Mueller has not been very fluid on details of the investigation, leading some to believe that he was more of a supervisor of the operation rather than in the middle of the probe itself. Rick?
Mike, I know you're watching this in real time along with the rest of us, but is there any early buzz there on Capitol Hill about how the Democrats and the Republicans are performing and whether Mueller met or exceeded or didn't meet expectations?
I've talked with some Republican sources who say they think that Mueller has not changed many minds at this point. They believe that there will not be great momentum moving forward with impeachment proceedings, a groundswell around the country. After seeing this, Democrats were clearly hoping that if people didn't read the book, the Mueller report, that they will watch the movie today. It'll be interesting to see if there's a change in approach when it goes to the House Intelligence Panel, which is up next, Rick.
Mike Emanuel there on Capitol Hill. Mike, we appreciate it. We're going to get to Ellison Barber with White House reaction in just a minute, but first I want to introduce our panel. Dr. Rebecca Grant is a national security analyst and president of IRIS Independent Research. Max Burns is a Democratic strategist and senior contributor, Millennial Politics. And Sery Kim is a Republican strategist and former senior Trump administration official. And Vinoo is a criminal defense attorney. And we appreciate all of you being here today. If we could quickly go through the group and get your initial reactions and takeaways from this morning's hearing, and we could start with, why don't we start with Max? You're on camera. Go ahead.
I think it was a huge event. I think when you look at people who are criticizing on the right how Robert Mueller sounded and the time he took to answer questions, you notice they're not attacking what he's actually said. And there were three things that really stood out. One was saying that the reason that he did not indict the president was the Office of Legal Counsel memo in response to Ted Lieu, and then in response to Representative Buck saying that if the president were not in office, the evidence would allow him to pursue an obstruction charge.
We heard that loud and clear and often, Sery. Is that accurate?
No, it's not accurate. I mean, the main takeaway that I have from this is that if we're watching a movie, the movie is called Titanic. Robert Mueller was terrible. The Democrats have alleged that the president committed conspiracy. Very clearly on page 116, Robert Mueller said in the iceberg of truth that there was no conspiracy. The Democrats have alleged that President Trump was guilty of collusion. But in Title I, Subpart 5, subsection C1, and I quote, "But collusion is not a specific offense or a theory of liability in U.S. code, nor is it a federal criminal crime." And so the iceberg of truth, not a Republican truth, not a Democratic truth, but the truth that is in the Mueller report, not only exonerates President Trump, but it goes out of its way to show he did not lie.
Rebecca, Mueller made it very clear before his testimony and in his opening remarks that he would not talk about anything outside of the report. He wouldn't talk about information or evidence that may have led them to begin their inquiry in the first place. And when he was asked about the report itself, he wouldn't read it. He asked the lawmakers to do it for him. And he seemed to fumble quite a bit with his answers. I wonder what ultimately was the point if all he's going to talk about is what's already written, and then he was very vague and just kept referring back to the report. What did they accomplish?
Well, he did not pick up this report and run with it. We know what the intent was, and that was to see if the House Judiciary Committee is ready to try to roll this into impeachment. My read, we are no-go for launch on impeachment.
Vinoo, do you have a different opinion on that?
Look, again, this is a political question, and how this appeared. Robert Mueller was not a good witness because he wasn't going to be answering certain questions. Now, if you're trying to convince the American people that you should go forward and try to get support for that, I don't think Robert Mueller is the person to have done that. That being said, I disagree with some of your panelists there. He's laid out very clearly in his report. And as I said earlier, it's really up to the Democrats. They have the majority. They should move forward. They have the evidence. It's whether they have the political will to do so. And it doesn't appear that Robert Mueller pushed it in a way that's really supportive for them.
What did appear, Vinoo, is that the Democratic lawmakers were cherry-picking moments and lines from the report and emphasizing those. And I wonder, as a criminal defense attorney, if it was your client who someone was cherry-picking bits and pieces from a evidence report or whatever it was, how you would handle that.
I don't think it was cherry picking. I think the problem that the Democrats had is a communication problem. You're trying to explain to the American public a very complicated legal theory. I've been practicing for 20 years. I'm a former prosecutor. This obstruction is a very difficult thing to explain to the layman. So when you're trying to break it down, I think some of them did very poor jobs. Some of them did very good jobs of trying to make it colloquial. So when you're trying to go through the elements, that's a mistake. You can't do that, in this kind of setting, because all you're going to get is the report speaks for itself. And I think that's the big mistake they made.
What the Republicans were doing during this hearing clearly was trying to shift the focus to what prompted the inquiry in the first place, and suggested that the new Attorney General is, in fact, opening his own investigation into that piece of it. And I know we have some sound cut on this topic, and I think if we can just roll maybe SOT 8, I believe SOT 8 is regard to, that's about Peter Strzok. So let's start with SOT 7, if we can, from the Republican lawmaker from Texas. Okay, we don't have it. Sery, your feeling on this point, that they are seeking information on what prompted it in the first place, and Mueller's reluctance to talk about that, his refusal to talk about that, what does that say to you?
I I think it's absolutely critical. We are not here because Mueller wrote a report. We are not here because Donald Trump won the presidential election. We are here, as footnote 21 of Volume 2 says, because the Clinton campaign manager on July 24th, 2016 said that President Donald Trump and his campaign worked with Russia to fix the 2016 election. Then footnote 51 through 72 goes through the Obama DNI and CIA, specifically alleging that the FBI was looking into whether Donald Trump criminally interfered in the 2016 election. So why we're here is so critical and so important. And I think the Republican members, for once, as a former Republican staffer, did what they should have done.
Let's now listen to that sound from Congressman Gohmert.
Let me ask you, when you talked to President Trump the day before he appointed, or you were appointed as special counsel, you were talking to him about the FBI director position again. Did he mention the firing of James Comey?
Not as a candidate. I was asked.
Did he mention the firing of James Comey in your discussion with him?
Cannot remember.
Pardon?
Cannot remember. I don't believe so. But I'm not going to be specific.
You don't remember. But if he did, you could have been a fact witness as to the president's comments and state of mind on firing James Comey.
I suppose that's possible.
When did you first learn of Peter Strzok's animus toward Donald Trump?
In the summer of 2017.
You didn't know before he was hired?
I'm sorry?
You didn't know before he was hired for your team?
Know what?
Peter Strzok hated Trump.
Okay.
You didn't know that before he was made part of your team. Is that what you're saying?
I did not know that.
Max, I'm wondering, as a Democratic strategist, how do you respond to that? That doesn't put your...
I think it really shows that Bob Mueller left public life before this sort of hyper-partisan Trump era where we have people like Louis Gohmert asking him questions that Gohmert knows Bob Mueller cannot answer because of DOJ policy.
What about what he's getting at here, what they're shining a spotlight on, which is that, as they said, the 14 investigators, the attorneys that Mueller hired, were all Democrats, and that there may have been and may well have been political bias inside the camp. It's all there in the Peter Strzok text and the back and forth between them.
Well, not that Louis Gohmert cares about the truth, but there was actually additional Republicans on the committee, and Ken Starr made thousands of dollars of donations to the Republican Party. Nobody said he was unfit to be head of the special prosecutor under Clinton. It's a federal crime to screen people for government office based on their political leanings, especially when they're civil servants.
If I can just jump in here, let's say that all of this is true. Let's say that Robert Mueller hired only Democrats. Let's say that Robert Mueller himself wanted to make President Trump be guilty of an impeachable offense. Let's say all this is true. Under the weight of all of that political bias, they still did not find that President Trump conspired. They still did not find that he concluded. And President Trump was specifically told in the letter of the Mueller report, which I had literally read 19 times, that he was allowed for political purposes to fire the FBI director. And just one other thing, because it wasn't mentioned, and it's so important to me. In footnote 364 of Volume 2, Bob Mueller was recorded as being told by FBI Director Comey that not only was President Trump not being investigated for interfering with Russia, but he told congressional leaders that the FBI was not investigating the president personally. So what I want to know as an American taxpayer, what I want to know as a United States citizen, is when and which members of Congress were told this back in 2017.
Sery, if I could just remind our viewers, you have read this report how many times?
I read it 19 times.
I
read it.
Hold it up one more time.
I read it I want you guys to know. I read it so many times. I bought another copy, not just any copy, the Washington Post's copy.
Fair enough.
And still, no conspiracy, no collusion.
Wait, hold on.
It seems like you only read the first half.
No,
because the instruction parts you don't
we got to get to
Happy to comment.
Ellison Barber at the White House, because we know that the president, or we've heard the president might not be watching, but Ellison, from what I'm hearing, is he is watching.
Yeah, that's right, Rick. So President Trump, in the days leading up to this, was asked more than once by reporters if he planned to watch former special counsel Robert Mueller's testimony. He said that he did not intend to watch it. Fox News is told that he has been watching it today, as well as doing some other things. It also appears, based on his Twitter account, that he has been following along. The president has tweeted he has tweeted 2 times since Mueller's testimony began. There are some retweets in there as well, but 2 specific tweets coming from President Trump since Mueller sat down and started speaking. In one tweet, President Trump appeared to quote a Fox News contributor, writing, Mueller was asked whether or not the investigation was impeded in any way, and he said no. In other words, the tweet went on, there was no obstruction. President Trump tweeted at least 7 times before Robert Mueller sat down on Capitol Hill. In those tweets, the president attacked the former special counsel and others associated with the Russia probe. He asked why Hillary Clinton was not investigated for deleting emails and took issue with the person acting as Mueller's legal counsel. Aaron Zebley sat next to Mueller as he testified in front of the House Judiciary Committee. Zebley is going to be sworn in when Mueller testifies in front of the Intelligence Committee next. A source close to former special counsel Mueller told Fox News Zebley would accompany Mr. Mueller to today's hearing, as was discussed with the committees more than a week ago. Zebley was the deputy special counsel and, according to the source, had day-to-day oversight of the investigations conducted by the Office of the Special Counsel. President Trump claims, quote, it was never agreed that Robert Mueller could use one of his many Democrat never-Trumper lawyers to sit next to him and help him with his answers. This was specifically not agreed to, and I would never have agreed to it. The greatest witch hunt in U.S. history by far. Republican lawmaker asked Mueller if he could charge the President of the United States with obstruction of justice after he left office. Mueller replied yes. So far, President Trump has not reacted to that. Apart from maybe 1 or 2 retweets, he hasn't commented or seemed to react at all to any specific moments from this testimony, but we do expect President Trump to leave later this afternoon. He has a campaign fundraiser in West Virginia, and that most likely will be our first chance to hear directly from President Trump on camera. He'll probably have more to say about the hearings, but so far, Rick, no specific reactions from the president on moments, but we've heard him say throughout the morning, no collusion, no obstruction, a line we've heard a lot, and he obviously is watching.
Ellison, we haven't talked a lot about Zebley because we really didn't see him and we didn't hear from him, but we know that it was important, apparently, for Robert Mueller to have him sitting next to him during the hearing. Do you know why that is?
Well, I don't have any specifics on why he wanted them there. We know that he had asked the special counsel or people close to the special counsel, the former special counsel, say that this was something that he had discussed before. We saw other attorneys behind him who were affiliated and worked with the special counsel's office advising him. It's pretty normal, pretty standard to see a witness come in front of a committee, be it on the House or the Senate side, and bring some sort of legal counsel with them. Exactly what the president objects to, we don't have any specific details beyond that tweet that he sent out, but it's something that bothered the president. We know that he believes that the people around Mueller were biased against him, and he apparently does not feel comfortable with Zebley being there. It seems from what we hear from sources who are close to the former special counsel that he is someone who was close to Mueller throughout all of this. He was in a lot of the meetings that maybe Mueller necessarily was not. He had day-to-day oversight, so perhaps that's why Mueller thought it was so important to have him with him when he went before the committees.
Ellison, thanks for that, and we look forward to hearing what the president's reaction might be to these hearings later today. Dr. Grant, I want to bring you back in because I saw you reacting to some of the things that Ellison was saying, and we did hear a question asked about whether or not the president could be prosecuted once he leaves office, and the answer was by Mueller, yes, he could, but he didn't say specifically that he would be based on what they learned during their investigation. Am I right in saying that?
Exactly right. And while technically Mueller says, yeah, sure, I guess we could prosecute him, but here's the heart of it all. The report makes really clear that he doesn't have the good set of facts. And we saw this come out from the questions of the Democrats and others. He does not have that excellent set of facts on obstruction to take forward. The report made that clear. Mueller at one point even said that we worked hard to put in exculpatory evidence of things where it said, well, maybe this was why the president was acting this way. He had other concerns. North Korea was launching missiles in this time period. A lot else going on. So I'm not sure that while technically he'd be eligible, I don't think Mueller has the facts, and I think that's what he's telling us.
Robert Mueller, midway through his second round of questions from congressmen and women, this time with the House Intelligence Committee. They're, as you heard, taking a 5 to 10 minute break, so we have an opportunity to get some reaction to this hearing from our panel, our very qualified panel, including Dr. Rebecca Grant, a national security analyst and president of IRIS Independent Research. And while you're on camera, let's just start with you. What do you think about this second round so far?
Well, they've picked apart the report a little bit. We've heard that there were 25 leaks and they were all anti-Trump. There was a really stinging exchange on not exonerating and going down that road and how it tainted everything and the appearance in the report. That's what I think we've seen a little bit about Mueller. He cracked just a tiny bit talking about WikiLeaks when pressed on that, and he said that he didn't like what Trump had tweeted about WikiLeaks back in October 2016 in the campaign, and Mueller said twice that he thought that was subject to investigation. I thought you saw a little of his opinion come through there. Having said that, still no coordination, no conspiracy, not making the case.
Max Burns is a Democratic strategist and senior contributor to Millennial Politics. Max, you think Democrats are making any headway here this afternoon?
I think it is hilarious political theater to see Devin Nunes complaining about leaks, a guy who had to, in March 2017, apologize for stealing confidential information from the House Intelligence Committee and taking it to the White House to leak it to the press.
I think his best line was Nunes when he said that there was collusion, but that it was the Democrats who colluded with Russians for the Steele dossier to launch the investigation. He called it political theater, this whole thing.
And it's worth noting that in the Steele dossier, the first claim was that Russia engaged in a widespread digital campaign to influence the election. That's been proven true. That's in part one of the report.
Sery Kim is a Republican strategist and former senior Trump administration official. Sery, thanks for being with us. What do you think so far?
I think there's a lack of clarity on Mueller's part and the Democratic Party as it relates to the Mueller report, because they are muddling the true message, which is there was no conspiracy between the Russian government and Donald Trump. And whatever Mueller found about illegal activities by Russians were done on their own initiative. This is where the cherry picking of the report by the Democratic members of the House Judiciary Committee and the House Intelligence Committee is laughable and frustrating. And when we speak about things that are really hilarious, like Max mentioned, Chairman Adam Schiff is on video trying to obtain evidence from Russian operatives about the 2016 governmental elections on camera. That's hilarious.
Vinoo Varghese, criminal defense attorney, also watching from another studio. Vinoo, Mueller had said before the hearing and during his opening statements that there's a lot he won't talk about. And he's limiting his answers to what is in the report. There's got to be some frustration on both sides here that they're not getting what it seems they want.
I will say that in contrast to the morning, it seems like Mueller is actually giving more commentary. I mean, and I think it's in part because the Democrats are asking better questions. What I said before, as far as the morning went, is that they were not effective in asking the right questions and focusing on the facts here. But specifically, Congressman Carson really went into detail about Paul Manafort. And he asked him very pointed questions about Manafort providing intel, providing campaign data. Is this problematic? And Mueller says yes. I mean, we got some emotion out of here. And then when other congressmen asked about the tweets, he said, yes, this is problematic. So we're finally getting something from Mueller here because they're asking better questions here. So, but again, look, it's after lunch. Are people paying attention? I think Mueller got a shot of espresso in between sessions, and he's a little more lively.
And we all got some pizza, which we appreciate. There was another moment when Congressman Turner talked about the report and about collusion not being a legal term in criminal statutes. But then he went on to talk about one of the last lines of the report, which was that the report does not exonerate him, meaning does not exonerate the president. And he kind of went off on that point, that exonerate isn't actually a legal term and is not within the purview of the special counsel. I want to play that and get your reaction to it.
So this is the part that I don't understand. If your report is to the Attorney General, and the Attorney General doesn't have the power to exonerate, and he does not, and he knows that you do not have that power, you don't have to tell him that you're not exonerating the president. He knows this already. So then that kind of changed the context of the report.
No, we included in the report for exactly that reason. He may not know it, and he should know it.
The congressman said, you can't exonerate him. You don't have that power. The statement, he said, is misleading and meaningless. Sery, you're an attorney.
I mean, I thought that was a powerful exchange simply because when you look at both Volume 1 and Volume 2 of the report, it is an academic analysis of law, facts, evidence, and suppositions. The whole report is an analysis, and Robert Mueller perpetually makes calls. He makes calls whether it should be in evidence, should not be in evidence, should be in law, should not be in all. So when he says that he is choosing not to exonerate the president by implicitly not saying it, I think that is a very manipulated manifestation of his own words.
Vinoo, also an attorney, you have to appreciate the argument of the congressman there.
Actually, I think Mueller, for one of the rare times, actually responded with some emotion. I think that espresso kicked in a little bit. And he said no, that the Attorney General didn't realize that this is what we were supposed to do. So what he's saying is that, and look, the language is there. It's been said many times ad nauseum throughout, that if he could have exonerated President Trump, he didn't. What he did was lay out a roadmap for Congress for impeachment. Now it's whether the Democrats have the courage to go forward, take these facts as they has been laid out in a painstaking and thorough manner, and go down that road. That's a political question. As far as legal questions go, I can tell you, as a former prosecutor, criminal defense attorney, if I had a client who had all these acts, he's going to be charged, he's going to be arrested, and we'd have a long road ahead before us in a court. But because he was a president, he's not been charged. And that's the conundrum that the Democrats face. Do you go forward when you can't really explain this? They did a terrible job in the morning of explaining this to the American people, but they're doing a little bit better job now, but will it matter? Who knows?
Well, it seemed pretty clear from the report that a president, or we know elsewhere that the president can't be charged with a crime, but what's not clear, or what seems actually clear in the report, is that there wasn't enough evidence, there wasn't enough there to actually charge him, if I'm reading it correctly.
Yes, and I think what's not coming out, and I hate it that they said, the Russians were helping Trump. The Russians do this everywhere. They did this in Macedonia. They've done this in the past. The Russians wanted dirt on Secretary Clinton. They thought she was going to win. So there is a big effort by Russia here, but the way we're hearing it is almost like Putin woke up one morning and said, I want to help elect Donald Trump. Not the case. This is just how they do business, and we have to be aware of that. We're getting the wrong steer as though Russia massively just tried to assist Trump. That's really not the case. They thought Clinton was going to win.
Right, and it seems clear from the Republican arguments that, in fact, Russia was working both sides here. They were trying to get dirt on both candidates. They were, in this campaign of meddling on part of the Russians, were trying to infiltrate and prepare themselves in the eventuality of either of these two candidates becoming president.
In their usual ham-fisted propaganda, Lenin-Stalin, heavy-handed way that did not have much of an impact on Americans. And you know what? Robert Mueller knows that, and the intelligence community knows that. They know that this Russian stuff is real, and they want to go after military penetration and other cyber things, but it just wasn't that effective in helping Trump. It wasn't.
Again, we're waiting for the hearing to continue here with the Intelligence Committee. Max, do you think that the Democratic-led committee is making any headway this afternoon?
I think the questions have definitely gotten better, and they're more to the point, and they're more germane to the actual Section 1 of the report on Russia. They actually asked a very interesting question about whether the president was potentially blackmailed with Russian compromise. And Robert Mueller said no, that it in fact wasn't necessary. Mueller agreed that the campaign relied on intel given to them by Russians that was stolen, that Paul Manafort confessed to trading internal campaign information for money, and that everyone involved in this jeopardized national security by giving Russians potential blackmail material.
I don't think anybody did that.
Chairman Adam Schiff opened this afternoon hearing and spoke for some length with Mueller on the subject of who did what, and here's a little bit of that.
Mike Flynn lied.
He was convicted of lying, yes.
George Papadopoulos was convicted of lying.
True.
Paul Manafort was convicted of lying.
True.
Paul Manafort in fact, went so far as to encourage other people to lie.
That is accurate.
Manafort's deputy, Rick Gates, lied.
That is accurate.
Michael Cohen, the president's lawyer, was indicted for lying.
True.
He lied to stay on message with the president.
Allegedly by him.
And when Donald Trump called your investigation a witch hunt, that was also false, was it not?
I'd like to think so, yes.
Well, your investigation is not a witch hunt, is it?
It is not a witch hunt.
So there it is on the record, not a witch hunt. And I think that was perhaps one of the more effective moments, Sery, when you had him going down name by name and saying these people lied.
It's effective only if you think that they lied because they conspired with Russia to fix 2016. Manafort is in trouble because he lied about a federal registration. Papadopoulos is in trouble because he lied under oath to Mueller, right? Flynn is in trouble because he perjured himself in a grand jury proceedings. None of these have anything to do with the reason why all of us are sitting here today and why Robert Mueller is testifying in front of Congress. The root cause of all of it, the roadmap that we're looking for was there criminal conspiracy? Was there an obstruction of justice that relates to Russia in 2016? And the roadmap that is missing, that Bob Mueller is not ascertaining, is the role that the Clinton campaign played. And I think it's incredibly important that you pointed this out, Rick. While, let's say, Don Trump Jr. took a meeting, the Clinton campaign paid $500,000 to Russians. So when you compare these two things, take a meeting, pay $500,000, you tell me which one is worse.
Well, that was a key point for a number of these lawmakers to push that narrative and push the investigation into what started all of this, whether or not the Democratic campaign. Vinoo, go ahead.
Yeah, look, I appreciate what Sery's saying. That's a nice spin, but look, you've got this thing here. And you got to understand something that's going on. When Schiff is questioning Mueller, these are two prosecutors or two former prosecutors, and neither of them know how to answer a question or ask a question properly. Schiff was going down the road of trying to get him to get Don Jr. That he was guilty of conspiracy, but he couldn't do it.
And that concludes a marathon day for former Special Counsel Robert Mueller. Back-to-back congressional hearings with both the House Intelligence Committee and earlier the House Judiciary Committee on his Russia investigation and the results of that investigation. As you've probably noticed, there were a lot of questions he would not answer or deferred. By our count, more than 120 of them this morning, and then close to 70 this afternoon, including the question of whether or not they tried to interview Donald Trump Jr. And according to the Mueller report, they did, in fact, ask Donald Trump Jr. to answer some questions, which he refused to do. As Chairman Schiff just summarized, Mueller did say that the Russians are interfering with elections as we sit here and that he expects they will meddle in the 2020 election. But there, again, was a lot that he would not talk about and a lot that lawmakers asked him about that he wouldn't answer. And to that, we want to get a quick wrap-up from some of our guests here, members of our panel, Dr. Rebecca Grant, national security analyst. Your reaction to the hearings and to what Mueller did and didn't say.
I can't believe they dragged him up there for that. I also can't believe it took 2 years and yielded so little. Bottom line, the president wasn't charged with anything. I think it's time to move on. And here's the big postscript. President Trump has been very, very tough on the Russians. Powerful national military strategy, lethal aid to Ukraine, getting serious with Iran, out of the INF Treaty, sanctions. He's been very tough on the Russians. I'm glad Mueller got those indictments of the Russians, and I take his warning seriously that we need to be wary for the future, not only about Russia, but about China, about others, anyone who wants to interfere. But time to move on.
Max Burns, Democratic strategist, I'm guessing that you will not agree that the president has been tough on the Russians. I also am interested in your reaction to the hearings.
I think this shows Robert Mueller is such a throwback. He wasn't there to jump up and down and get in fights. He wasn't there to carry water for the Democrats or the Republicans. He was there to outline his findings and to make a case. And I think for as much as Republicans want to say there's nothing there, 37 indictments later, 6 convictions in the Trump campaign, and multiple ongoing investigations from a Republican FBI and a Republican DOJ, I beg to differ. I think there's still a lot there. And we'll probably see more investigations from the House now as a result.
Sery Kim, Republican strategist, these were both Democratic-led hearings. Did the Democrats accomplish their goals today?
No. My takeaways are twofold. 1, impeachment is dead. And 2, Bill Barr is alive. Impeachment is over. They had 137 Democrats vote to table impeachment proceedings. Nothing said today is going to resurrect the energy. And 2, Attorney General Bill Barr is investigating the root issues underlying why the Clinton campaign alleged Donald Trump and the Trump campaign criminally colluded with the Russian government. I think the Democratic Party is more scared of Bill Barr than they ever will be of the Russian government, because the truth is going to come out.
Vinoo, a criminal defense attorney, your reaction to the hearings?
Well, I think the second half went a lot better for the Democrats than the first half, and I think that you got some really good questions asked by the Democrats, and the answers they got were better. I mean, you know, Congressman Maloney getting to the fact, and he really got to this point of saying that Trump was untruthful, that they had enough. Basically, Mueller was trying not to admit that, but he did. Then later on, they had Mueller saying that generally Trump was untruthful. So now the ball rests with the Democrats, and, you know, they have enough to move forward on impeachment. The question is a political one. From a criminal perspective, I can tell you if any of my clients were engaged in this kind of nonsense, they would have been charged. And I do think that Mueller flinched. Maloney asked him, "You're not the kind of guy that flinched." Mueller did flinch, because I think the prospect of a long, drawn-out court battle over subpoenaing the president and subpoenaing the president's son in this situation made him flinch, and that's unfortunate.
You know, we appreciate your time and the time of everyone on the panel. Thanks very much for being with us, and thank you for being with us throughout